Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to the ReMARCable Opportunities, your gateway to the EPA Brownfields Mark grants. Next slide, Joelle. So, just a little housekeeping here before we dive in. Okay, here. So, the slides will be made available after this presentation, and we'll have all the hot links that are in the presentation. It will have hot links to websites and webinars. Attendees will be muted. Can be unmuted if you want to deliver your question in verbally, but your questions can be submitted in the Q&A box, not the chat, but in the Q&A box, and that's where the responses will be posted, or the responses can be delivered verbally. And this meeting is being recorded and available in a few days, so you can reference it and forward it to your colleagues. I am joined here by Joelle Greenland, who is the at Brownfields Mark Dynamo. And between Joelle and I'm Ignacio Dayrit. We have about 56, how many years experience in Brownfields grants?
Well, now you're aging me, Ignacio. So yeah, we'll just say it's a lot of years,
Okay,
okay?
5. We have a lot of experience in Brownfields grants, having managed them ourselves. So we just don't provide technical assistance, we actually manage them. We get into the weeds. Though we are not getting into the weeds so much in this webinar, this is more of a, next slide, please. That's our picture. This is more introducing what CCLR can do for you and helping you recognize what a brownfield opportunity is. It is still misunderstood. When people hear brownfields, they kind of say, we don't have brownfields. Well, you might not think so, but you can probably use brownfields grants for your projects. To identify the resources and pursue the funding, and understand the technical assistance to brownfields program of EPA and what CCLR can do for you. Let's see. There's going to be a lot of money because of the bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill, as it's uh, you know as it's the
They keep
acronym.
changing that, right, Ignacio? It's
Yeah,
billed and it's like, no, it's ill. So you guys will hear a lot of different things, but it's why we're told say it this way and this way, but you guys know what it is.
right. But this is a wake-up call. The EPA and the TAB webinars are not for almost another month, and we're a week in. And if you really haven't started, even read the guidelines, uh, take them out now, because this is your wake-up call. Again, we won't go into too much detail, but we'll highlight the key changes, and we'll go through key tips and those key changes. Next slide. So about CCLR, our mission is to promote the sustainable and equitable and responsible reuse of underutilized or environmentally impacted properties. So we do that through education, training, helping you with your projects. We do this in 8 US states and territories. And we also provide very similar services to California's Department of Toxic Substances Control under their own program. So again, we see this in and out, and we do this not just daily, in our sleeps. And again, we're here to help you. Our services are generally free. I don't think we've actually gotten a dime from most. You know, sometimes people contract with us, but generally our programmatic services are free. One-on-one technical assistance, the webinars, the workshops. We're at those conferences, and we're just here to help you get the grants and help you get get your job done. Next slide. So again, the formal definition of brownfields. It's on the screen, but again, the key term here is potential. Everything has potential, and every site has a potential to be contaminated if it has any historic use. It, every site also has a potential for reuse. And that's where the practical definition comes in, is that your land reuse, recycling of abandoned, vacant, or underutilized properties can utilize brownfields incentives. The site does not have to be dirty, known to be dirty, or any list. You can use brownfields resources for these efforts. So, so why apply? Well, because you have projects. You have projects and you have sites that are probably eligible. Uh, there's a laundry list of things you can do with the grants, but flipping off to the next slide, these are the outcomes that you want from your brownfields projects. If you're doing this in your community, you can probably use a brownfields grant. And we're here to help you figure out and get these grants. So over to the next slide. These are the grants that are available. We've seen MARC before. MARC is short for Multipurpose Assessment Revolving Loan Fund and Cleanup. It says there that they're due November 22nd, but EPA themselves, the EPA staff recommends that you start putting them in, submitting them the week before, because the week of the 22nd is a holiday week. And grants.gov, where the portal where you'll be submitting it, will be undergoing maintenance. So we know, so we know when things go into maintenance, surprises happen, snags happen. So don't wait. Do it at least a week early. And we will repeat this over and over again. Don't delay. And there are many surprises that are there that could trip you up. So try to try to do it early. The next slide will show you all the offerings this year. Now you see two columns and the totals there. 198 estimated grants, and the two columns for the BIL funding, 105 million, and the regular appropriated funds, 64 million. So that's 64.5 million. You know, over the last 20 or so years, EPA has been awarding between 50 and 70 million dollars annually. So they're continuing that, estimating 64.5. But this year, they got the BIL fund. So that BIL fund will not be there forever. So don't think they're going to be offering 170 something million every year. This is a special, remarkable opportunity. So,
Oh,
so
here's the first joke, everyone. Strap in. Here we
and
go.
that 198 estimated awards, that includes those coalitions comprised of 2 to 4 different members. So EPA wants 300 communities to benefit from this. Usually they get 100, 120. This is unprecedented, more than last year. So again, now's the time to apply. More money available per grant. So the next slide is again, who's eligible? The same ones that have been eligible all this time. But we have, there's going to be a big focus on the nonprofits though. There's a huge focus on how to bring benefits down to the community through nonprofits. Next slide. So I'm just going to go briefly over the types. I mean, this is a review for most of you, but it's going to show what's new, highlight what's new in all of these. Multi-purpose grants are like the Swiss Army knife of the MARC grants. They'll do the assessments and cleanups, which I'm going to go through later. You have to own at least one of the sites that are being proposed. There is no cost share because of BIL. Again, another remarkable development. It's not going to be that way forever.
No.
and participant support costs are uh, are being encouraged. I'll get into that later. And again, it's for the revitalization of a specific area. It's up to $800,000 for 5 years. That's new, and EPA estimates giving 17 of these. Next slide. Assessment. These are the meat and potatoes of Brownfields grants. Uh, Again, you can do an inventory, environmental site assessments, outreach. There's that participant support costs again, cleanup planning cost estimates, and other evaluations and studies you can do in support of redeveloping a site. There are three types now. You got the state and tribal coalitions, up to $2 million. A coalition, which are back this year, up to 1 million. And community-wide is 500,000. They're different, 4 to 5 years, and there's a lot more grants available, a lot more awards available. Next slide. Cleanup. Okay. Oh, revolving loan fund. I'm sorry, revolving loan fund. Now this is
My favorite.
for loans and sub-grants for cleanup. So you loan to private entities, or you can also loan to eligible entities if you wish, or sub-grants to eligible entities. A minimum of 50% of your funds should be for loans, and again, sub-grants to nonprofits and public entities. Again, no cost share. This is a time to apply if you don't like that cost share. And it's up to 5 years and $1 million.
Yep.
And the cleanup, you have to own the site or sites. Again, to cleanup and reuse planning, regulatory oversight fees, and insurance. No cost share, again. And there are 3 levels this time. Up to 500,000, up to 1 million, or up to 2 million. So take a pick. Don't be too greedy though. And don't ask us if everyone asks for 2 million, whether they'll, EPA will have to decide how to distribute that if everyone wants 2 million and no one wants $500,000. Don't be too greedy.
Right.
Next slide.
Reasonable costs, right, Ignacio? EPA has stressed that over and over again. Reasonable costs. So just make sure you're keeping that in mind.
All right. Okay, so the key changes, and again, be sure to review all the information on the EPA website, because there's lots of information there which Joelle will go through. They're both multipurpose and RLF this year, and there are no site-specific assessment grants. You can do that under a community-wide. There are assessment coalitions. New communities are encouraged to apply. I think up to 40% or more are actually reserved for new communities. New communities are also encouraged, if you're small communities, to join coalitions, especially if you don't want to manage a grant, you want to be part of a coalition, and we'll get into the coalition specifics later. Participant support costs are emphasized. What does that mean? Well, in the past, there's a whole, some grantees were very good at doing phase 1s and maybe phase 2s. But some of these communities probably didn't have any community outreach or didn't have revitalization plans. So those reports sat. The participant support costs are there to encourage the connection between the community plans, the community, and the work you're doing. So that kind of read between the lines here. Don't be a phase 1 and phase 2 hog. This is about reuse. So keep that in mind as you're doing your budgets. Again, nonprofit community coalitions are encouraged and even actually get more points if they're a non-lead member. Now there's a new twist for cleanup grants. in the state letter requirement. So if you're going for a cleanup grant, take note of that. And procurement. Now, the procurement doesn't really show up so much in the narrative, but that shows up in the threshold and how you explain how you have hired or how you procured and how you plan to procure consultants. Keep note of that. If you have to, work with your legal counsel, because you could get tripped up if you don't do it the right way. And site-specific work for multipurpose and assessment, they're kind of different. You know, it's 40% for a community-wide, 60 and 70%, 60% for coalitions, and 70% for multipurpose. And what does that mean? Well, it means that multipurpose, you kind of probably have a better idea of what you're going to be doing, and so that EPA expects you to actually do less of the general planning type stuff and be more site specific in your work. Flip with that, with the site specific work for community-wide assessments, you'll have smaller communities going for these $500,000 grants. And many of those smaller communities probably don't have, well, probably have plans that aren't quite as well developed as larger coalitions. So there's a lot more leeway to do community work, outreach, participant support costs for smaller communities. That's kind of reading between the lines there. So I'm going to hand it off now to Joelle, who's going to get down and detailed with the rest of the stuff.
Thanks, Ignacio. Okay, guys. So lots of stuff has been gone over. Great job, Ignacio. Must-dos. We've said this, you've heard it again and again and again and again. Start early. And starting early doesn't necessarily mean getting out that laptop, starting to write the grant. Sure it does. However, what we're talking about here in this webinar, because you're gonna go through so many webinars, right? EPA's webinars, the TAB webinars, you know, specific region webinars. This webinar is laying the foundation, right? Giving you some tips, some insights, so that a couple weeks later from now, you're like, oh, I wish I had known that, you know, weeks ago, months ago, right? So number one, start early. So right now, start gathering your stakeholders, start gathering, start the conversation. If you need an APCA for your cleanup grant, if you don't even know what I'm talking about, call us up, let us know, because there are certain things that you need to do right now. And one of them is a unique entity ID. If you don't even know what I'm talking about, pay attention right now, okay? So the DUNS no longer is accepted. For those of you who have applied in the past, you've used a DUNS number, right? You get into grants.gov, you have a DUNS number. Yeah, that's not allowed anymore. You need what's called a unique entity ID. And so a unique entity ID is at SAM. And SAM is not your grocer guy, SAM, or your mail person. SAM is the System for Awards Management, right? So hopefully you know that, but I will show you in a second this hyperlink that takes me to sam.gov, right? And this is basically the clearinghouse. If you want federal money, you got to sign up with SAM, okay? It's also if you ever get disbarred, which nobody gets disbarred, right? But there are entities that do get disbarred. Well, that bad report card goes into sam.gov, okay? So this is the unique, so as soon as you go into sam.gov, this box pops up, right? And it says, hey, unique entity identifier used. This changed back in April. So if you don't know about it now and you don't have one, after this webinar, you're going to start that process today. I talked to somebody last week and they said they're still waiting for theirs and it's been 6 weeks. So today is the 22nd. You have 2 months. All right, November 22nd. And of course, that's server maintenance on grants.gov is going to happen the weekend right before these are due. So you X out of that, and there it is, DUNS to unique entity ID. You go through the instructions right there, getting started. All these websites are very step-by-step tutorial, easy peasy. If you have questions, call us up. Okay, so you're going to have to set up a sam.gov account to go through all that. You do that, and then you get your unique entity ID. It's going to take, you won't get it right then and there. You're going to have to wait a couple of weeks, and you can still check in. There's a little checkbox that says, how am I doing? What's my status of this unique entity ID? Okay. Most people will jump to grants.gov. I would suggest that you don't do that. I would suggest you start with the EPA guidelines. This is a hyperlink. So you are going to go to the EPA guidelines, which will pop up with the solicitations. Okay. Here you can find all the open, closed, upcoming solicitations for brownfield grants. Okay. So what's noted up here is all here, right? Okay. So let's just say we're interested in a cleanup grant. You would click on that. And of course, EPA sends you to another EPA site, right? Okay. So this is good. It's thorough, right? So then you see open solicitations here. It's also down here. So cleanup grant guidelines, that's what you want. Now, when I click here, now you go to grants.gov, okay? And you go to the specific, right? The specific offering, the solicitation, or what's called the RFA, request for applications, okay? So you have these tabs, right? You're gonna go to the package, okay? You can go to related documents, but look for the RFA right there, right? If you go to the package, it's all there. You have preview, apply, your CFDA number. Actually, it's now called an ALN, but assistance listing number, but I guess they're still using the CFDA number. Anyway, if you preview, you will see all the mandatory forms. Yes, there are mandatory forms, by the way, that you will need to fill out, right? It's not just the narrative part of the grant. So if you go into download instructions, right, you finally get to the guidelines of the cleanup grant, okay? So these are the guidelines, okay? And if you look in here, right, they're going to talk about what's, Ignacio mentioned them, right? The threshold criteria. These are the things that are pass, fail. And you can still talk to EPA right now about the threshold criteria. For instance, the cleanup grant, you need an APCA, right? Not only do you need an APCA, right? The analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives, but you also have a community notification of the APCA, and there are requirements around that, okay? This is probably one of the top things that people mess up with threshold criteria for cleanup grants is that community notification of the APCA. So read your guidelines very carefully, depending on what application you're going after, okay? So back to the must-dos. So start with your EPA guidelines. That'll bring you right to grants.gov when you pick the applicable grant that you want. However, if you go into grants.gov, you can always do, let's do that. Let's just show you. Joelle, what if I don't pay attention to you and I just use grants.gov? That's a great question. Sure, go into the keywords up here, type in brownfields, and it'll bring up every grant, right, that is in grants.gov that has the word brownfield in it. Hence the reason why I said go through the EPA guidelines, because it'll take you to the specific grant that you're looking for. Cleanup, multi-purpose, there's 6 of them, okay? Make sure you're working and you're reading the right guidelines for each grant, okay? So here's the multi-purpose, right? Here's the coalition, there's 6 of them, 05 through 010. And you can click on this and it'll go same screen that we were at before. lots of loops. Okay,
Well,
here's
yeah,
where
while
the,
you're navigating, there was a
yeah,
question that came in. Very good,
sure.
Pichai, who is starting early. Asked for SAMS.gov for a number, but then they need a, the text verification. They don't have a local number. So, that kind of question actually, even EPA will not respond to because they're not the
Yeah.
SAM experts.
No, you got to go to Sam.
You got to go to Sam. And
You got to
so,
go to Sam. That is when Sam comes in. You would call Sam. You would get their assistance on that because you're right. When I did this personally, I'm not applying for a grant, but I went through this so I could feel the angst and go through this and see, gee, what? And I will tell you, I'm a pretty seasoned grant writer, and this took me a minimum of an hour to go through the verification code, all that stuff, setting up a grants.gov. But I will tell you what happens, right? You would hope that you say, okay, great. I know the guidelines. Here we go. Let's go apply to the multi-purpose. Nope. Psych, you don't apply right away. This is where they'll say, okay, now you have to log into grants.gov. If you don't have an account, you're going to have to register as a new user, right? When you hit that, now you're going to have to fill this out, right? And this is when, when you set up an account, after you set up an account, when you first log in, it is going to ask for your username, and then it's going to ask for that unique entity ID number. This is essential to have because then it's going to ask you for your project name. That project name will tie into what's called workspace, okay? We're augering down a little too much in this, but trust me, if you go back here onto grants.gov, this is a wonderful place, though, to get lots of information, grant writing tips, the YouTube videos. I will not hit this because it goes into lots of video, right into the sound of YouTube videos. But if you go there, there's a lot of really quick, short YouTube videos that will talk you through about workspace, authorizations, your team, if you're doing it as a team, grants as a team. So there's lots of information, like getting started. How do you do it? So lots of tutorials, but it's going to take time, which is why we say over and over and over again, start early. If I was a betting person, I would say this first part would take somebody a day to get through and get squared away and ready to actually start applying. That is putting the words into the narrative sections. Okay. So
and
we've
again, for
talked about,
Pichai, yeah. So Pichai,
yeah,
I saw that there was a chat. You can chat with folks. So if you're not getting a response by email, try chatting on.
yes, chats are good. And again, if you are getting, oh, here's the one thing I want to say something. Right here with grants.gov, this was one of the, now we all know passwords, right? And we all know how to create your passwords. However, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is not going to work. You're in grants.gov, they're a little tricky. They do not allow dictionary words, but you're going to have a capital letter, some numbers, and some lower cases, right? So you can't use dictionary words. So you can't use four-headed giraffe, right? Words. So you're going to need things like AAA 111 exclamation point, whatever. You can't make a word. Write it down too. All right, afterwards. So just like Ignacio had said, you're going to get the verification code. You'll need to probably set up that workspace project name. And then there's correct authorizations under grants.gov. Submit early. As Ignacio said, the server maintenance is going to go down on a Saturday. It's going to hopefully come back on that Monday at 6 a.m. Okay, the 21st. Moving along here, emphasized areas. Okay, so in talking in hearing from EPA and the guidelines for this year, the emphasized areas are the ones that you see on the screen here. Justice 40. By now, you've probably heard of this. You're aware of it. Justice 40 basically is this administration's promise to basically deliver at least 40% of the benefits, right, federal funds, to disadvantaged communities, okay? We've also heard about disadvantaged communities. What does that mean? Well, in every one of the Brownfields guidelines, it gives you the definition of disadvantaged communities, okay? It is a very comprehensive list. So please don't be myopic in thinking that it's just low income, right? Or it's just poverty. It's there's a lot more categories there, okay? Climate change, of course, resilience, restoring communities, community services, housing, affordable housing. Participant support costs they're not new. However, EPA is emphasizing them because in the listening sessions, if any of you participated in those back in March, EPA listened and they said, how do we get the money to the communities and to the communities that really need them? And how do we hear from them? And so nonprofits and community organizations that work directly with people, like they're in the trenches, they see it on a daily basis. These costs, we're going to go into it a little bit more, probably in the next screen or two. So I'll dive into that a little later. Planning activities. Please remember, and please read the guidelines. Ignacio has already gone over some of the percentages, but please read the guidelines. The percentages are very specific in how much of your funding needs to be spent on specific, as I call it, buckshot, like, phase ones, phase twos, right? But are you really working towards change in the community that affects the disadvantaged community or the built environment? How does it move the needle, if you will, the metrics that are involved, the outcomes and outputs, right? So make sure that you allow for planning activities and you allow for PSCs in those assessment grants. Capacity building is huge. Non-displacement. I do want to talk about this. Ignacio, remember when they talked about this, it is key that even if there is no displacement, say that. You need to say that. Say, our project, there will be no displacement. If you don't say anything, that's not good.
Say it doesn't apply.
Just say it, okay? Everybody's got to either say it doesn't apply, or if it does, you then have to talk about there will be displacement. However, we have the following in place to address this displacement, right? X, Y, Z, right? Okay. So poorer and smaller communities, they did talk about this. This is also mandated in the offering, if you will, in the solicitation. They have to have this. Read the guidelines again, as far as Ignacio, remember they were talking about even if you don't have the information, the data on threatens like cancer, asthma, right? If you don't have it, you need to address it, okay? So if not, you're going to lose points.
Right.
So
that's very key, because again, EPA is actually giving more points to communities that can have data or other proxies that they are small communities or do not have the budget for it because they are small, and that they are suffering from certain health impacts associated with brownfields.
correct.
So they're stacking it. Yeah, they're stacking it for poor and communities that need the help.
Right. And we have another slide about various websites that you can, if your community doesn't collect it, there could be other agencies or other state, national, other webinar, not webinars, websites that have the information that are collecting it. Okay, there they are. I'm that good, Ignacio, right? I'm just, I remember that that's where it was. Anyway, so here it is, Justice 40, Grants.gov, Learning Center, the unique identifier number. So these are just some of the key websites that we put our heads together and thought, okay, these are some of these websites that we have gone for essential data that should be or is encouraged to be in the application. However, correct me if I'm wrong, Ignacio, but I believe I heard and saw this written that the the EJ screen and the CJES, the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, those two tools are optional. However, in the successful grants that I have seen over the years, these tools are often used, and they often use the data from them. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ignacio, before I go to the next slide?
No, you got it covered. It's you can use other measures that don't show up, that tailored to your needs, because these are fed sources, and the
Right.
more fine-grained information or anything that you can get from local authorities are also useful.
Absolutely. Okay. So circling back on this point, participant support costs. So during those listening sessions, they heard and they said, you know what, we've had this. PSCs are not new. This has been there all along. The key thing is, this is where a community liaison, not an employee of the entity that is applying, can be paid, right? Can help you, can broaden the capacity, right, of the applicant. If the applicant doesn't have the capacity to go out to the community, they can partner, right? They can pay for a community liaison or an organization that actually does this. And the thing is that if you do participant support costs, it must be in the budget and it must be in the narrative, right? How is this entity going to be going into the community and connecting what you do in the grant, in that work plan, right, to what the community liaison is going to be doing? Okay, it needs to be specific.
And this can be represented in different ways. I mean, it could be part of your overall outreach budget of the main grantee, or it could be a sub award, or it could be a contract. It all depends. So there's not one way to do this, but be sure it's there and you explain it very clearly.
It has come up again and again. So I would say this is one of those areas that they're honing in on, I would say, is participant support costs, and how, because I know a lot of community meetings that I've run, childcare is definitely an issue, especially at night. So offering that and having that, as Ignacio said, as part of your overall community engagement strategy is definitely makes your grant that much more competitive. Okay, so the summary. We've talked about the unique entity ID, the registration, authorized users for grants.gov. That's your first and foremost thing. If you haven't done that yet, you need to get on that today, okay? Review the guidelines. So these first three, I would say, if you have not even looked at the threshold criteria for each of your, for your grant, I would do that also this week and find out if there's any, we're talking about, do they own the site? Does the applicant own the site for the cleanup? Have you done an all appropriate inquiries? There are lots of different issues and each grant is different. So make sure you go over the guidelines, threshold criteria. If there are any questions about threshold criteria and eligibility, please contact your EPA office, your local office, or contact us and we will get you in touch with the project managers or officers for those regions to get you the answers that you need. Start gathering people's names, your team, your stakeholders, right? Who is your Brownfields team? If it's the coalition, make sure that who you're gathering, you have got their name, their title, the years, what they've done, kind of like their CV, so that you know how to concisely put it together for the programmatic capabilities.
And actually their story, because they're going to have to give you a lot of content.
Yes.
You have to kind of warn, I wouldn't say warn them, but you know, you're going to need information, demographic information, their plans, their stakeholders, their community liaison if they have one, all of those things. So it's going to be more active as a coalition, but it's, you know, it's all for the good of the project and for the community.
Absolutely. If you read the multi-purpose guidelines, it specifically states how you know, you've picked a target area based on community outreach and input. So really read the guide. I can't stress it enough because the words that they use, for instance, the state letters that Ignacio was talking about, they're not just support letters, okay? With the cleanup grants, there are very specific instructions with those state letters. So we don't have time to go into them, but there was just a little bit of a, not an amendment, but instead of saying required in the VCUP, it's eligible to be in the voluntary cleanup program, okay? But there are 3 different areas and you need to read those guidelines to see which one of your projects that letter that's required. So it's no longer a, yes, we support this cleanup project letter. That's not the letters anymore, all right? Break your projects down into components and layers, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So look at your project as a whole and then break them down into components and layers and then match the budget and the funding, the appropriate funding. Working with a consultant subrecipient. So if a consultant is writing your grant, okay, make sure that your expectations and the deliverables that are clearly defined, okay, that deadlines are established in the very beginning. It is September 22nd. Work backwards from November 22nd and say, draft 1 is due here, draft 2 is here, the final, you know, going over it. Our, you know, tab webinar, national tab webinar is October 20th. That's when things should be fine tuning and you're really honing your grant, okay? The AOR, the application uploader. I know you're saying, what is an AOR? Well, hopefully most of you know what an AOR is. However, this is a term that is used in grants.gov. So if you don't know what AOR is, guess what? I'm not going to tell you because I'm going to force you to go to grants.gov and find that out, okay? This is tough love today, sorry. So do not use an RFP, RFQ provided by a consultant that intends to submit, okay? Why? Okay, I could go on for days for this. However, I'm going to tell you, 2 CFR, no 2 CFR 200. It is called the super circular. Years ago, they were all over the place. And then they said, you know what, we're going to consolidate everything and we're going to call it the super circular. So it's all under 2 CFR 200. If you have never read 2 CFR part 200, please do yourself a favor and get to know 200 and 1500. It will be in your work plan. It will come up over and over and over again. These are not EPA guidelines. That is Code of Federal Regulations. It applies to every federal grant. I cannot stress that enough. This is where most people trip up. There are procurement guidelines in there. So if a consultant helps you with the development of an RFP, RFQ, request for proposal, request for qualifications, they cannot then submit a proposal for that RFQ, RFP, okay?
And also, if they actually participated in writing the grant, read between, again, you have to be very careful in working with consultants when you're in writing the grant and as you're procuring their services. You don't want to get tripped up with the EPA, and it's actually part. It's not so much in the narrative, but it's going to be in the other documents you submit.
Right. So you need to procure for writing the grant. You need to procure. If you get the grant, you need to procure it again. Okay. And so not only do you need to follow 2 CFR 200 and 1500, you also need to have followed your internal procurement policies. Okay. So even if the federal guidelines said, that RFQ needs to have gone out for a minimum of 30 days. And your procurement policy says 45 days. And it only went out for 30 days. The 45 days still has to be followed too, because that's your own internal procurement. So procurement, please talk to your legal teams and stuff, because this is something that people trip up on all the time. But subawards, subrecipients need to be in the budget and the work plan. So did we talk about the work plan being a legally binding document?
Oh, that's kind of
Yeah,
new.
that's kind of new. Yes, this is highlighted, bolded, and EPA has said it again and again. For those of you who have not gotten an EPA grant, after you secure an EPA grant, after you're awarded, yay, that would be next May. You would find out April, May, and then you would work on what's called a work plan. A work plan is basically saying, hey, thanks for the cooperative agreement, and this is what we plan to do. The work plan is going to be taken from your grant application. It is literally probably going to be a cut paste. Okay. Okay. So when you're writing your grant, don't be so prescriptive, like a target area. Elm Street to First Avenue to blah, 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 right? If you get so prescriptive and then you get the grant and then you need to go outside of Elm Street, First Avenue, right? Probably not going to happen. So you need to just make sure that your target area is described enough, right? That EPA knows what you're going to do, but not too much. You have priority sites, but then you have a target area, so that if your priority sites aren't all gonna, go through your ESAs, then environmental site assessments, then you still have your target area. You find another site, let's just say, that's more catalytic, you can still do that site, even though it wasn't mentioned as a priority site, it's still in your target area. That's what we mean by, making sure that you give yourself enough wiggle room in your grant so that you don't miss it with your work plan.
Yeah,
So
you just brought something up that, adding in new sites is actually something that the EPA wants you to describe too. So changing your work plan isn't the end of the world. You're going to have to negotiate it. You might have to. Depends on your region and your project manager. There is some, similarities cross region, but give yourself some leeway. Don't be so too detailed in your description, but give an EPA enough to chew on. Show that you're doing, site assessments and neighbors that need them the most.
Exactly. Okay, guys, you probably know TAB providers, technical assistance to brownfield communities. There are 10 regions, EPA regions across the United States. CCLR's is 9 and 10, as you can see here on the graphic. And here are other fellow colleagues across the nation. There are 6 TAB providers. CCLR does prepping your application. So let's talk about this. I know we have 10 minutes left here. Grant application checklist. Please help us help you, or help you help us. Anyway, regardless, please go to our website under, this is a hyperlink, and it'll take you to a bunch of things. Due to short time, I'm going to just stay on this slide. But one of the things when you scroll through is the grant application checklist. These are things like font size, page numbers, okay? Run a spell check, right? If your CCLR review, it's limitless, we'll review it, we give you a rubric, It looks like that, right? You start early, helps you think big, right? If you're ready now, send it to us now. But review this checklist first, okay? It gives you really great tips and pointers. And honestly, if we see one that comes through and you haven't even made an effort to do spell check, chances are it's not going to come to our review team, okay? So as my professors used to say, is it your best work? Okay. If it is your best work, great. We'll review it. Okay. Consultants, if you are doing it on behalf, if you are submitting a review on behalf of an entity, please include the applicant's contact information and CC them on the email to CCLR. Okay. Send it as soon as possible. Like I said, I have people have said, okay, so we can send it again and again, like you'll look at 4 drafts. Sure, we'll look at 4 drafts. If you're showing progress and that you're actually, you know, reading our comments and actually incorporating them and addressing each one, sure. Webinars to watch. Last slide, guys. Upcoming webinars. So take note of these dates. These are the EPA national webinars. Each one has a subject as far as the grants. If you're looking at cleanup grants, remember there are 3 different buckets. No, if you're wondering, gee, if I apply for $1 million and I don't get the $1 million, will I automatically go to the $500,000 bucket? No, you won't. So if you plan on going for 2 million and you think that you'll just keep going, like, okay, they'll put me in the $1 million and then they'll put me in the 500. No, whatever bucket you pick, that's the bucket that you stay in. All right. So make sure that you can really substantiate those dollars, if you will. October 13th is Region 9 specific. Ignacio, do you have any information as far as the Region 9 with?
Well,
they're just
sorry.
They decided to do their a very detailed one just for Region 9.
They had actually more. They have 3 actually.
Okay, so this is the first one kicking it off.
That's the first one, and then you can learn about the others.
Great. Okay. And then, like I said before, national tab, we're going to be wrapping it up. You'll meet all the other tab providers October 20th. And we're going to be honing in that application and giving you more insights and tips.
Really, okay? But by October 20, you should really be done. So anyway, start early. That's why we're having this. So there's some questions here. Are there any questions? We've answered most of them. Okay, Pichai, what can we unmute Pichai? We don't know what you mean by these communities. Can our host unmute Pichai? Or Pichai, if you could elaborate on your question. Now, there are also a few things. Terry Griffith,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. For years now, I've been trying to find a way to identify the communities that are having issues to have their land cleanup. I don't know where to begin, but I certainly have 40 plus years of experience cleaning up. I used to clean up Superfund sites for New Jersey DEP. But I don't know how to be connected with all of these communities.
So are you a consultant, or are you working for a local or state or regional government?
I'm a consultant. I own a private company, and I do consulting and I do turnkey, as far as construction as well.
So for consultants, the best tip is to join your regional or your state. Yeah, you have meetings in Region 2. There's BCON. There are other
state environmental agencies usually have contractor lists, and they also have lots of listservs that if you join, I know Ecology does, DEQ in Oregon, Idaho, getting to know the state, because they're really the ones that run, you know, obviously the VCUP programs, the voluntary cleanup programs, and everyone needs to, at some point, right? They're the gatekeepers of brownfield projects. So that's where I would personally start.
Right. And a question, Joe Marie typed something in. No, you do not have to own the site for assessment grants. You need site access.
Yep, exactly.
Could I get a question in? I'm trying to copy and paste information in the chat, but it only allows me to do select all, but I'm unable to copy. I don't know if I have a chance to write all of this information down in the chat box.
Is it a question?
Yes, because I want to copy and paste the chat box, but I'm able to do so because when I put in my cursor, it only allows me to choose one option, select all.
Okay.
And
Yeah. If you have a question, you can always send it to info@cclear.org, and we can certainly get back to you also.
Info what? I'm sorry.
Info@cclear.org.
At cclear.org. Okay, that's
CCLR.
CCLR, right?
Yes.
Right.
On the screen.
Okay,
if
thank
there's
you.
not another question, I would say that the other thing is, besides SAMS, besides grants.gov and SAMS, again, I know I probably said I'm a broken record. Read your guidelines, please. If you can't figure out how to get them, contact us. We will give you the PDF. I've downloaded them all. Okay. Read the guidelines and read the threshold criteria. Make sure that you've had that conversation. You may say, yep, we've got this. You know what? You've got everything to gain to contact the EPA office right now and say, we think we've got this. We've met all the threshold criteria. Why not get to, you know, just get that stamp of, you know, yep, you're right. All looks good, right? Because again, pass, fail. EPA, if you don't pass the threshold criteria, it doesn't move on in the solicitation process, okay? And Region 9 or 10 are great. So they're there to help, to assist, to guide, all right? But they can't talk about your projects. Only threshold criteria.
Yes, just threshold. Do those early, right away. Don't let that slip.
Right. So if there's no other questions, remember these are projects. They're not just sites. These are communities. Remember the social aspects, the economic needs and benefits, strong community engagement. Really just don't, you know, yeah, we will get out there and we'll contact the community. We'll work with them. Who, what, where, why, when, right? Really engage the community. They're there. They're the ones that are being affected. And that's really what brings the heart of the story together. All righty. Ignacio, anything else?
I think we just about covered it. I don't see any more questions or chats. There's one comment here. Oh, two comments here in the chat. Oh, they're thanking us. So you're very welcome.
You're welcome.
Send in your reviews very early so that you know, we have a track record to maintain. So you're going to get a lot of attention.
And the reviews are all said with good intentions. Everything is given with good intentions. We want you guys to be really successful. You know, don't take it personally. It's given with tough love, and we're here to help. If you don't know where to start with bullets. Just start with bullets and put it all down in the different sections, all the things that you want to say, and make sure that you're not saying it again and again and again. It only needs to be said once in the appropriate section.
Exactly.
All righty.
Well, very good. At the top of the hour, good afternoon, all. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.